Okay, so we've finished our wood, and now we're ready to create a chisel generator, which we're going to be able to use to apply different chisel marks according to masks on this wood. We're going to make these all inside this package. So I'm going to create a new substance graph, and now it's the way we've always done it, and we're just going to call this one chisels. And again, we've got the PBR template. We're not going to use a lot of these because this is actually just going to be a grayscale mask. And again, it's something that's going to be able to be reused with other materials. And as you go along, you find that sometimes there are noises that, you just can't find the right noise in the substance library. So it's always good to be able to make your own noises when you need them. Okay, let's go to our library, and we're going to get some nodes here. First, I'm going to get a gradient. I'm also going to get a shape. And finally, there it is, grunge map 005. And you will notice that this is quite a dense thing. We're going to be using it just for these basic lines, so we don't need it at parent size. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to drop it down. In my notes, I had it down to -3. And we just got to make sure that, whatever the next node that we apply onto here, which is going to be this transform node, because I actually want it running in the other direction, we're going to make sure that this is relative to parent. And I'm going to turn it 90 degrees. Now, my shape node, I'm going to switch that pattern to waves. So this guy here. Now, these are going to be the basic shapes. Actually, one more. We need one more shape. We need also a pyramid. These are going to be the basic shapes with which we're going to make our square chisel, because I've decided, I had it split up where I'm making a square set of square chisel marks and a set of round chisel marks. You can make whatever kinds of shapes you want. You can do this for anything, but it's something that, if you're making a lot of wood and a lot of carved wood for a project, you can go ahead and just create your own noises and put them in a graph like this, and then once you're making other materials, you can go into your library, it will be living in here with my stuff somewhere, and you can just drag it out into the next material that you make, and this way you have, A, you don't have to do it over again, and B, you have like consistent markings throughout your project. So when you can't find a noise that you like in substance, it's relatively easy to make your own, and that's what we're going to do here. Right, let's get a transform 2D, and we'll duplicate this out a couple times, because we're now going to start combining these basic shapes. I'm going to turn this 90 degrees. We're going to start combining these basic shapes to create our tool marks. So let's start with the basic outline of the chisel. It's going to be a square chisel. I'm holding down the control key while I do this, and I'm finding, the rectangular shape I like. And I kind of like that. But the problem is that it's tiling. So we need to turn off the tiling, and I want this to be a no tile. And now I just have this basic rectangular shape like a chisel. In fact, I think, do we want, no, it'll come in on the sides once it's kind of up on the edges a little bit, but we're going to start manipulating it in other ways, and that'll probably deal with that. Let's get a levels node. Now, this gradient is very shallow. I want, a chisel is going to have a flat top, and then a gradient sort of on the beveled edge of the actual chisel. And I need to do that here. And I want to harden that edge up a bit, so I have a sharper end here. And it's coming away from the middle a little bit, which is what I wanted to. Maybe a little bit thinner. So I'm holding down the control key. I want to start looking at this in the renderer, and we may as well set up our final material, and this way we can use it as a viewer for now. First things first, let's take our nodes here and switch them around. We're going to have two outputs here, and they're both going to be masked. Actually, no, I think I had one of them as, let's do them as height. The reason I'm stressing it is because whether or not it lets you plug into other nodes, we can always switch it around later if it's not what we want. I forget how I had it set up, but we'll call this square chisels, and we'll duplicate this since we got it all set up, and we'll call this round chisel. Okay, and this stuff we can just get rid of. Now, because I have them set up as height, it's not really going to show me anything in this render. I mean, we could set it up so we could just look at black and white images here, but we might as well see what the normals look like, because that's really what we care about. And the normals aren't going to live here because it's just going to send out grayscale images. So I'm going to come back to my Explorer. I'm going to go back to my project, right-click, New Substance Graph. And this one we'll call Carved Wood. And this is going to be our final graph that we're actually going to, that's going to have everything on it. And what we can do now is we can take the wood and we can plug it in here. Let's change that metallic to an AO. Right. Now let's go to the library, get that height to normal, and go back to our Explorer, get our chisels. I want that to be grayscale. Let's take a look at what's going on in here. Oh, because we haven't hooked anything up. That helps. All right. So we've got our grayscale output here, and we can blend that. And for now, it's going to give us an idea of what it's going to look like. Might as well stick this in here too. Let's get an invert grayscale, because this is showing us the highest, and whatever we have here, we're just going to end up inverting it. So now we've got this giant rectangle superimposed on our wood, which is what we want, because eventually this will turn into chisel marks. So let's come back in here. So, we have this basic rectangle of our chisel. What I want to do next is, if it's been used a while, it's going to kind of this is not going to be an even edge. So I want to sort of throw some grooves in here. So I want to kind of a little bit rougher, but in a very controlled way. And that's what we're going to use this for, because this gives me that kind of shape, basically. I still have to adjust it a little bit. So let's get a transform 2D. And again, we're going to want this one to not tile. And I'm also going to turn it by 90 degrees so that it matches that. And I also want it to match in size. So again, I'm going to just hold down the control. This way it just does it to the center. I'm also going to hold shift so that for the moment anyway, I think I'm going to stretch them out. And get it down to a size that I like. And let's get a blend node. And we're going to want to invert this grayscale. And we're also going to need a levels node in here, because we're probably going to want to sharpen up that edge. Actually, you know what? I don't want this to be no tile. I want this to tile this way. Now, I've turned it around. So that means that I'm actually going to set this to tile horizontal, and it's going to look like it's tiling vertically because I've turned the image around. But this is now going to give me a band of things that I can move across that image that's going to cut out on it, because we're going to make this darkened. So there we go. So I'm going to single click on my transform node, and now I can start messing around with this edge to get it to look like I want it to look, whether that's changing the levels or changing the size. And I think we're probably going to do a bit of both. So maybe something like that. Now, don't forget, this is going to be, there's going to be a whole mess of them. So it may look like super even now, but it's going to give an effect. And I think that's probably okay. Plug this in here. We can take a look at it back in our carved wood. So that edge is starting to break up a little bit, but we still have this back end to deal with because we don't really want it to be there. I mean, if you're chiseling something, you're doing it at an angle, so this back end kind of disappears. And going back to here, this is where this gradient comes in, because we can use this gradient then to sort of fade things out. I'm going to want to sharpen it up, but let's see what it looks like. Oh, I don't want to do that. I want to use it as a mask, sorry. So I'm going to put this in here. Our background is going to remain black because it's a grayscale. And then we're going to cut out using this gradient. But I really want this to fade out more. So I can come back into this levels node and start messing around here. Kind of fades that out. Go. So that's, getting there as far as a basic element of noise that we're going to feed into our effects map. Now, the final thing that I want to add to it is it's like perfectly smooth right now. And I mean, this part is. We've added some wear to this edge, but I also want to add some wear to what's going on up here, and that will be this. I'm not going to do it straight from here. We're going to because we're going to use this again for the smaller one too, so we're going to want to change the size. So we'll just use this transform here just to rotate it. And this way we can concentrate on transforms for other stuff in here. So we're going to get another blend, and we're going to lay a noise over it. I think we're going to have to make a mask for this. Yeah, I used this. So in my notes, I ended up using this one. So I guess it was good enough. We're going to take care of the rest of it up in here. But yeah, I was looking at this edge. Yeah, okay, that's good. Let's get a blend node. And we have this transform here. I'm going to take this guy. And we are going to turn this 90 degrees. And we're going to use this as a mask for this before we apply it to here. And now I can start manipulating. Let's put a levels node in here too. I realized I forgot something. There's a warp in here as well, because I don't want this to be straight. I'm like, why is it being so straight? Let's drop a warp in there. And the last thing we need to do, I think, is still fade it out. Yeah, so we can take this and run it through the exact same gradient that we run that through. And apply it. Oh, wait a minute, that's not right. Oh, because I'm using a dark in here. There. I'm not super happy with my gradient. Let's come back in here and see if we can't do something about this now. That's better. But this is still, this isn't tool wear. This is like really radical. So the final thing that we need to do is just drop the opacity down. And I think I had it as multiply. Let's use multiply. So it's really only roughing up the surface a little bit. Come back to our carved wood. Yeah. So, we can have that surface be a little smoother maybe, but other than that, I think our large square chisel mark is done. We have it a little bit narrower. And have this a little bit less opaque. Yeah. All right. Now we can make an effects map to turn this shape into an actual noise. So I'm going to turn that into a grayscale, and we're going to plug in our image. I'm going to right click, edit effects map. Now, this first one, we're going to keep relatively simple. We're not going to change the size, and we're just going to do like regular random numbers between 1 and 0 for our rotation and our offset. So it's going to be the simplest of all of them. The size I chose for my chisels was, I had 4 quadrants here. And we also need an, now we have 5 quadrants. We need an iterate node. I was just looking at the orange thing. I wasn't paying attention to what kind of node it was. And we'll change this to our root because we're going to be putting a function on here. Okay, we're going to build it on the color luminosity channel. We'll make an empty function here. And we're going to need some stuff to make random stuff with. So we're going to have a float 2 and a float 1. We'll need to vector this float 2. And we're going to need to set our variables. So we'll call this one rotation, and we'll call this one offset. And I'm not going to copy them because I'm just going to have to trust myself to spell that right. And finally, we need to sequence this stuff. So first it's going to do the rotation, then it's going to do the offset, and finally we're going to end up with the number 1. And we'll set that as our output. And our pattern offset will come in here, make an empty function, get our variable, and type in the word offset, set that as our output node. I don't think we put an image in there yet. Did we put an image in there? No, we haven't set that up yet. So let's just finish doing this. And our rotation, and this is a single float, and we're going to type in rotation and set that as our output. Now let's take a look at why this isn't working. And that's because we probably have no pattern set in here. And as we up our iterations, it looks more and more chiseled. Oh, we didn't set the output. So we've got some chisel marks here. I want to see more iterations because I really want to see them piled up on top of each other to the point where those rectangles aren't quite so obvious. And that's a good time to put in our input parameter here for our iterations. So we're going to have 4 effects maps in the end. 2 of them are dealing with the large versions, and 2 of them are dealing with the small versions. I'm going to keep things simple as far as our input parameters go, and we're going to have iterate large and iterate small. And these are going to be integers. We're going to have our minimum as 1, and let's start with 20 as our max. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this. We'll paste it, and we'll make this iterate small. I'm also going to change the default to 10. All right, so we'll come back into our effects map. We'll go to our iterations, and we're just going to drop iterate large in there. This way, we can come into our carved wood and just go into our chisels. And now it has those iterations here where we can control them. I see one thing that's bothering me with this. Let's come back into our chisels. What I'm not liking is I'm getting these flat areas here. I want it to be like all chunky, and that has to do with our global opacity in the effects map. Oh, and another thing, you know what another thing would help? Since we are doing chisel marks, let's flip them in here. I mean, we're never going to want them positive. I'm going to get this Invert Greyscale now that we have our effects map. And the other thing that we can do to keep it even without getting areas of where it's too black. You see, the problem with doing a global opacity is it starts to get, you start to get a lot of areas where it's just pure white and it's flat and there's no, they're just areas of flat, whether they're black or white. And you start losing the detail in this gray. A way of kind of keeping that is by kind of blending a lower iteration over on top of itself. So if we take what comes out of the effects node, and in this case we're using a darken blend. Once I start moving this transform, if I single click on it, I can kind of fill in areas without losing a lot of those, sort of mid tonalities. And let's do that again. So I'm trying to get it all as gray as I can. And this is with the iterations, I think, set to 10, which is what we set our fault at. And before I plug this in, oh, we've negated it here. Yeah, okay. Plug that in. Let's come back to our carved wood. Let's get rid of that invert grayscale because we're inverting an invert. And that's much better because we're not getting those areas of flatness where you could actually see like separate rectangles. So that's good. I still have, might want to do one more. Well, actually, let's see what happens when we up. Oh, that's set at 20. Yeah. Because, that's why we were getting the flat areas, because we're starting to, because we're laying things on top of each other, we're starting to get that black. So you can go too much as well. So those are our large chisel marks. I mean, it's not, we haven't done anything besides normals in here. But this is the mask that we're pumping out. So we're just getting a rough idea of what it's like. And we need to make the small square chisel marks now. Okay, these are going to be simpler. We're just going to riff off of what we've got going on here. So I'm going to get a transform 2D. I'm going to use this as my base. I'm going to make this thinner. And then we're going to create sort of the noise on this one from this rather than gouging stuff into it. First of all, let's squish this down so it's more appropriate to our shape. Like that. And we're probably going to need a levels node in here. And then what I want to do is cut this out according to our gradient here. So I now have this thing that I can move around just like we did with the other one for this smaller shape, which I also want to cut out the gradient on. Like this, according to this mask. And then, again, we can, let's multiply it. And we can start messing around with the opacity. Let's take a look at what that looks like. It's going to be in the positive. So this is like a finer tool. Okay, I don't like this. Those are too deep. And I think I do want a jagged edge on here. So let's start by using this as our base. Oh, but if we do that, we need to change this. You see, it was inheriting the no tiling from here, not anymore. So that'll rough up the front end, and I think a lot less of this. I think maybe we'll get those a little bit less pronounced as well, but it's moving in the right direction. So to do that, we're going to have to kind of give it its own set. So let's come back to using this as our basis. And then we're going to just do exactly the same thing. that we've got going on here. Just going to duplicate that. I'm holding down the Shift key, and that's letting me move those as a group. So now I can kind of custom make it for this one. Yeah, I think that's better. But we're not going to give it exactly the same effects map. Let's organize this stuff. This actually belongs there, and this is going to be for the small ones. So we're going to, I mean, we can duplicate this effects map. It's going to save us doing some work. So I'm going to right-click, edit effects map. First, we're going to change our iterations to iterate small. Now, I want my rotation to not be all over the place. You know, these are finer tools, and I want them to be all going in more or less the same direction. So we're going to have to set up some limits for this. And to do that, we're going to need some comparisons. Move this way. Okay, because we need to stick some extra information in here. Right now, this is giving us a random number between 1 and 0, which is a full turn. I want it to be more or less on the horizontal. And in reality, if I wanted to do that and have it face the same direction as the image that's coming in, it would have to be a number somewhere between, right around the number 0. So it would either be like a small negative number, like negative 0.5 or 0.5. That's a real pain in the butt as far as expressing it in here. It's a lot easier for me to express it on the 90 degrees. So I want something between 0.45 and 0.55, because if we're talking about the number 1 being a full turn, 90 degrees is 0.5. And if it's super duper important to you for the things to actually be turning in the same direction as what you're feeding in here, my recommendation would be to turn it around using a transform 2D. But these are chisel marks, and personally, I don't really care. So I'm just going to leave it alone. I care that they're running horizontal. I don't particularly care which direction they're doing it in. Okay. That being said, let's build this thing. So if this number that's coming out of here is less than 0.45, then I want this number. If this number here is greater than 0.55, then I want, oh, sorry, I did that wrong. If I want this, otherwise I want the random. I just realized I got that absolutely backwards. Then I want the 0.55, or I'm going to take whatever's fed out of here. And that's what's going to go into my rotation. There we go. Something's up. Yeah, that's flipped in here. There we go. Yeah, but they're going that way now. So, you know, now that I think about it, it's kind of driving me crazy a little bit. So I'm gonna do this. There. Fixed. And let's see if our iterations work. Yeah. So we can take this now and duplicate it. I think I even want to bring down what do I have this set at? I forget where I left this. So those are our small chisel marks. Now those, when we do them in the end, we're going to do a lot lighter because again, they're the finer ones. So Yeah, I'm not happy with that. Trying to decide why. Let's start with adding some more layers here. That might solve our problem. And maybe bring our global opacity down here. I don't think I want any areas of black at all. It's better. Yeah. So those are like the fine, the fine stuff that you can lay on top of the finer areas. But it looks like it's been worked just a little bit. Okay, so that's the square ones done. And now we just want to do some round ones. And we kind of already got our effects maps here because we're going to more or less reuse them. I mean, we may change the size, but it's pretty much the same thing. Right, so I'm going to want another shape. And for this, I believe I used a paraboloid. Yeah. And, we're going to kind of do the same thing to it. So I'm going to get a transform 2D node. I'm going to make it not tile. And we're going to squish this down. I'm holding the control key till I get to like a chisel shape. And we'll flatten out the top. And we'll cut out that gradient. I don't like where that gradient is placed. I'm going to get a transform 2D node in here, and I'm just going to manipulate it. Because it's working for up here, it's not working for down here. I want it a lot shallower here. Now, I am going to want a mask. So I had made another one out of a gradient map here. Turn that into a grayscale. And that's going to let me sort of push that gradient to where I want it as far as masking purposes go. Because I want to be able to take this same kind of noise that we have up here and lay it on top of the round one too. So let's see, where are we? I guess this one. I guess I'll multiply it. Just to roughen it up a little bit. But then what I also wanted to do, just to make it a little bit different from the square ones, I'm going to lay, how sometimes you have chisels and they have like, the inside has it actually goes a little bit deeper, so it has like a second parabola in there. And that's what we're going to do now. Take this guy, and we're going to squish him down. And we're going to blend him on top of here using a lighten blend, I believe. I'm off my notes. I'm making this up as I go along. I'm going to get that actually lighter. It's kind of a cool shape. I'm going to bring it back a little bit. Oh, now it seems too light. Okay, I think that'll make an interesting shape. And that's our big one. So we're going to duplicate this. Well, we should have duplicated the whole thing, I guess. And for now, we'll just plug it into the large one and take a look. Oh, wait, I have to change that back to our rough setting, which was the default, I believe. Yeah, so that's the round one. Again, I think it's a little harsh. Those edges are a little sharp. I want the effect to be a bit mushier. Wait a minute. Oh, because I'm supposed to be looking here. Okay. All right, let's see what we can do about that. Yeah, I think that might work. Oh, we're doing the big one, sorry. Yeah, I like that a lot better. Okay, so we've got the big round chisels done, and all that's left is the round small chisels. And just like with the other one, we're gonna base it on the large ones. So I'm going to take another transform node. I'm doing it off of this one because I don't feel like making it not tile again. And I'm going to widen it out. Oh, forgot to press Control, widen it out. Because I'm going to use this as a cutout, actually, I'm going to make a crescent, just like a small crescent. Let's get another levels node. And an invert grayscale. And then I'm going to take this one and basically just cut the tip off. Kind of like that. It's just like this little crescent shape. And we can copy this one. And according to my notes, the only thing I changed with this effects map is the number of quadrants. But again, I might change my mind here, but let me just do it according to what I had in my notes. That looks too small. So we'll duplicate this again. And we'll hook it up to the small one. I think that's probably all right. What do I have this set at? Yeah, I think we can probably take it off on the chisel end at this point. So I'm going to come back to my global opacity in here and take it down a little bit. That's probably okay. We can always make minor adjustments as we start making our final material. Right. So the only thing we have left to do is to make the switches that are going to let us decide which of the pairs that we want to use. So go to the library, try switch, and we just want a grayscale switch. I'm going to take 2 of them, and these are Boolean nodes. So whatever we put in here needs to have ultimately a Boolean output. And before we go in there, let's make our input parameters. So I'm going to add another input, and we'll call this chisel style. Again, it's going to be an integer. and we'll have it a drop-down list, and well, it doesn't matter. We'll let 0 be square, and we will add a new one, and we'll let 1 be round. So, in my notes I had it the other way, so let's just, to prevent mistakes with having opposites, it doesn't, ultimately it doesn't really matter. You just switch the true false in the function. But so we've got chisel style. Let's call this style, and the group is chisel marks. So we're going to have one of these switches for our 2 large ones and one for our 2 small ones. So whatever's going to come out to the output is going to be a pair, large, small pair of either square or round chisel marks. Right, so let's go into our switch, because right now we have it like this. So if this is true, it's square. If it's false, it's round. We'll make an empty function. We'll get in there. So if chisel style is 0, so we've got that set as round, I believe. That's why even when I do have this set up, I always forget what I set where. So if chisel style equals 0, then I think I've got this backwards, but this is what my notes say, so yeah, that's right. Okay. So if chisel style equals 0, let's just make sure that's what we got it set in. So 0 is round, then it gives us round. If it's square, it gives us square. Right. So I'm actually going to delete this guy, and I'm just going to duplicate this one, and we'll do the same thing for the small ones. Boom, and that's it. So if we come back into our carved wood, we can now change all this stuff. Let's get another height to normal, and for the big ones, we'll set it at the default. We still, we can just split it up. So we can look at them side by side. So we've got, this is the square set, and we can change the iterations independently for each one, and we can change our style. And and this is something that you can apply to any material, because now it lives in your library. So so we're done with our chisel marks. Next video, we are going to take care of the actual carving engine.